The room shimmered under crystal chandeliers and the soft clink of champagne flutes. Everyone was waiting for the bride's speech. The laughter, the tears, the sentimental ending that would wrap the evening in neat, forgettable emotion. They had no idea this wasn't a speech. It was a reckoning. I stood at the microphone, the weight of it steady in my hand, and let the silence stretch just a little too long. Across the room, I saw her, Vivian Sinclair. My sister. The maid of honor. The family's shining star. She smiled like she had been born for moments like this. Effortless, adored, untouchable. I returned the smile. Then I spoke. "Vivian," I said calmly, "you always had a talent for numbers, especially moving them in ways people don't notice." A faint ripple of confusion passed through the room. A few polite laughs. They thought it was a joke. It wasn't. I tilted my head slightly. "To understand how we got here," I continued, "you have to understand what happened 12 hours ago. When my perfect wedding stopped being a celebration and became evidence. The night before, my wedding in Manhattan should have been soft and sacred. Instead, it became the moment my entire life split cleanly in two. I hadn't planned to visit my parents' townhouse, but I wanted to drop off a small gift. Something sentimental. A final peaceful gesture before everything changed. I still had my old key. The door opened without resistance. The house was quiet, warm, familiar, the kind of silence that should feel safe. I called out, expecting an answer. None came, but voices drifted from the study. I froze. I knew them instantly. My sister Vivian, charismatic, polished, the one who always made rooms orbit around her. My father, Thomas Sinclair, who measured worth in prestige and appearance. And my mother, Lillian Sinclair, who always chose harmony over truth, even when harmony meant someone had to be sacrificed. I didn't move. Then I heard Vivian's voice clearly. "It has to happen before the final payment clears," she said. Calm. Certain. If her card declines at the venue, everything collapses. No wedding. No public success story. Just embarrassment. A pause. Then she added, almost lightly, "And Ethan will finally see who she really is." My stomach tightened. My father hesitated. "Vivian, this seems extreme," my mother answered before he could finish. "It's for her own good. Maya was never ready for something this big. We moved the funds into your account so it could be managed properly. She'll recover. Eventually, recover." As if humiliation was a vitamin deficiency, my hand went cold around the small gift box I was holding. They weren't just talking about money. They were talking about erasing me. A coordinated plan. Clean. Quiet. Precise. Not an argument. An execution. I stepped back without a sound. The hallway felt longer on the way out. Outside, the New York air hit like a shock to the nervous system. I didn't remember walking to the curb. The gift slipped from my fingers and landed softly on the stone steps behind me. I didn't go back for it. People always misunderstood what I did for a living. To my family, I was the serious one. The quiet daughter with the stable job and the tendency to overthink everything. Vivian was the success story. I was the cautionary contrast, but my real life didn't exist in their world at all. My name was Maya Sinclair, and I was a lead forensic analyst for the International Financial Integrity Task Force. My job wasn't accounting in the way they understood it. My job was following the invisible, money that moved through shell companies like blood through veins, networks designed to fund corruption, destabilize governments, and vanish behind legal language. I didn't work with spreadsheets. I worked with evidence. Years earlier, at a family dinner, Vivian had been celebrated for a promotion, an increase in title and salary that my parents treated like a national achievement. My father gave a toast, like she had solved world hunger. I remember sitting there quietly while they applauded her. No one asked about my day. A week later, I was assigned lead analyst on a multi-year transnational laundering case involving sanctioned state actors and offshore concealment networks. It was the kind of case that didn't make headlines, but reshaped economies. When I mentioned it casually on a phone call, there was a pause. Then my father said, "That's nice, sweetheart. Just don't spend too much time staring at screens." That was the moment my work stopped being work to them. It became a joke. Vivian started calling me Data girl. They didn't understand that while they were celebrating promotions measured in office titles, I was dismantling financial systems that funded organized crime across continents. To them, I was minor. In reality, I was dangerous, not because of force, because of precision. The case that changed everything broke open on a Tuesday morning in a secure lab in Washington, D.C. 3 screens. Endless transaction layers. Something didn't fit. They're laundering through duplicate invoicing, I said quietly. A colleague looked over. That's not enough to trace back. It is if they forget about latency signatures. A pause. Then everything clicked. We didn't celebrate. We never did. Just a quiet acknowledgement that something large had fallen apart, because we had been patient enough to see it. Later, Director Hayes called me into her office. She didn't smile. Your analysis just dismantled a decade-long sanctions evasion network, she said. Well done. That was all. But it was enough, because in that world, respect wasn't given. It was earned in silence. By the time I returned to my hotel room the night before the wedding, the emotional part of me had already gone quiet. What remained was something colder, structured, focused, the same state I entered when tracking financial anomalies across jurisdictions. I opened my encrypted laptop. My wedding dress hung near the window, untouched, a symbol of a life that no longer matched reality. I didn't look at it for long. I accessed the transaction logs. There it was. The wedding payment. Intercepted. Redirected. Account holder. Vivian Sinclair. A professional thief would have been proud of the elegance. But what caught my attention wasn't just the theft. It was the pattern. Smaller transfers. Years long, originating from my parents' retirement accounts. Slow. Consistent. Carefully hidden. This wasn't sabotage. It was extraction. Vivian hadn't only targeted my wedding. She had been draining my parents for years. I leaned back slowly. The pieces stopped moving in my mind, not because I was shocked, because the system had become visible, and systems, once visible, could be dismantled. My fiancé, Ethan Brooks, answered on the first ring. I didn't dramatize it. No panic, no emotional buildup, just facts. They tried to pull the wedding funds, I said. It's already been rerouted. And there's more. Silence. Then his voice changed. Tell me what you need. I need the wedding to stay on schedule. It will, he said immediately. I'll handle the venue. You handle the rest. And he did. One call. One transfer. Everything stabilized. No collapse. No public humiliation. Just silence, where their plan had been. The wedding day arrived like nothing had happened. White roses. Soft music. Perfect lighting. Guests smiling into champagne glasses, and my family sitting near the front, carefully composed, confused, in a way they were trying not to show, because the outcome they engineered never arrived. That absence unsettled them more than failure would have. Ethan held my hand under the table. A steady presence. No questions. No doubt. Just alignment. The speeches began. His family spoke warmly. Friends laughed. The room relaxed. Then, Vivian stood up. She was radiant. Controlled. Perfect. Her voice softened into something almost tender as she began speaking about our bond, about memories she had polished into fiction. The audience leaned in. She knew how to hold a room, and Maya, she said, turning toward me with glassy eyes, has always been the heart of our family. I will always look after her. Applause. Smiles. My mother looked close to tears. My father nodded proudly. They believed her. Of course they did, because that version of me was easier. I smiled politely. And waited. When it was my turn, I stood. The room quieted. I didn't rush. I didn't perform. I simply walked to the podium. Ethan met my eyes briefly. A silent check-in. I nodded once. Then I inserted the USB drive. The screen behind me changed. Not photos, data. Clean diagrams. Transaction flows. Account mappings. A collective shift went through the room. Confusion first, then discomfort, then recognition. This, I said evenly, is the transfer of my wedding fund from the original account into a private savings account. A pause. Vivienne's glass stopped halfway to her lips. I continued. I was told there was a risk my payment wouldn't clear, that I might be publicly exposed as financially irresponsible. My gaze moved across the room. That wasn't true. The slide changed. A timeline appeared. 2 years, multiple transfers, multiple accounts, all traced back to one source. My parents' retirement fund. Directed into Vivienne's accounts. The room changed temperature. I heard someone whisper, "No." My father leaned forward slightly, as if proximity could erase what he was seeing. My mother didn't move at all. I continued, voice steady. "You told me this was for my own protection, that I wasn't ready to manage responsibility." I clicked. Another slide. Total amount. Accumulated over time. Then I looked directly at them. But the data shows something else. A breath. A silence so complete it felt physical. "You weren't protecting me," I said quietly. "You were protecting her." My father's face broke first. Not anger. Comprehension, the kind that arrives too late to change anything. My mother looked like she couldn't decide whether to deny it or disappear. Vivienne didn't speak, because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't be measurable. I closed the presentation. The screen went black. No final statement was needed. The evidence had already spoken. I didn't stay for the aftermath. I picked up my glass, raised it slightly toward Ethan, and stepped away from the podium. He met me halfway. We left together. No argument, no confrontation. Just movement. Behind us, the reception continued in a suspended state of disbelief, like a system that hadn't yet fully crashed but no longer knew how to function. Outside, the night air felt clean. Ethan's parents waited by the car. His mother pulled me into a quiet embrace without hesitation. His father placed a steady hand on my shoulder. No questions, no judgment. Only presence. That was when I understood something simple. Family wasn't defined by proximity. It was defined by clarity. 1 year later, I stood in a high-rise office overlooking Geneva. The city was quiet beneath a gray sky. My name on the door had changed. Director Maya Sinclair. Task Force Lead for Transnational Financial Crime Operations. My team was multinational now. Analysts, investigators, coders who understood what it meant to trace intent through numbers. My phone buzzed during a briefing. Unknown number. I stepped out. The message was short. "We've started legal action against Vivienne. Your mother wants to speak to you." I was wrong. It was from my father. I read it twice. No emotional reaction followed. Not anger, not satisfaction. Just distance. A final confirmation that the world I had come from no longer had operational relevance. I archived the message, then turned back toward the briefing room. The system was waiting, and so was I. 1 year later, I thought that part of my life had finally reached its final line. It hadn't. It just changed shape. The Geneva briefing ended late that afternoon. The kind of meeting where decisions are made without drama, just mapped networks, projected losses, and the quiet agreement that certain systems needed to be dismantled before they grew roots. When the room cleared, I stayed behind for a moment, staring at the last frozen frame on the screen. A laundering route that stretched across 4 countries, disguised through layers of legal trade contracts. Complicated, but solvable. That was when my assistant knocked gently and stepped in. "You have another message," she said, marked personal priority. I already knew before she finished speaking that it wasn't from my father this time. It was from Vivienne, no subject line. Just a single sentence. "You didn't just expose me, you destroyed everything I had left." I stared at it longer than I expected to, not because it surprised me, because it confirmed something I had already understood in principle, but rarely seen so clearly in reality. People like Vivienne never see themselves as systems, only as individuals inside systems. So when the system collapses, they call it betrayal, not consequence. I deleted the message without replying, but the silence afterward wasn't empty. It carried weight. 2 weeks later, I was called back to New York for a closed hearing. Not criminal court, civil restructuring proceedings. My parents were there. That alone would have once shaken me. It didn't anymore. My mother looked smaller than I remembered. My father avoided my eyes at first, as if looking at me directly would force him to accept permanence. Vivian wasn't in the room. That told me more than anything else. When I sat down, no one spoke for a moment. Then the attorney began reading the findings. Misappropriated funds. Long-term unauthorized transfers. Breach of fiduciary responsibility across family-managed accounts. Every sentence landed cleanly. No exaggeration. No emotion. Just structure. When it was over, the silence that followed felt heavier than anything I had experienced at the wedding. My father finally spoke. "I didn't understand what she was doing," he said quietly. "I thought she was managing things." The word managing almost made me laugh. But I didn't. Because that was the core of it. They never thought they were enabling theft. They thought they were maintaining balance. My mother turned toward me then. Her voice broke halfway through the sentence. "Was any of it real for you? The wedding, the family?" I looked at her for a long moment. Not with anger. Not with warmth. Just clarity. "Yes," I said. "But not the way you think." I paused, then added, "I stopped believing in it the moment I realized I was the only one being asked to pay for it." No one responded to that. There was nothing left that could be corrected with words. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different from Geneva. Heavier, more familiar. Ethan was waiting by the car. He didn't ask how it went. He never did anymore. Instead, he simply opened the door. As I stepped inside, my phone vibrated again. Unknown number. I didn't need to look to know what it would say. But I did anyway. This time it was Vivian again. Shorter. More direct. "They're cutting me off completely. Do you feel better now?" I stared at the message for a few seconds, and for the first time I didn't respond by analyzing. I responded by feeling the absence of anything to analyze. Because the truth was simple. I didn't feel better. And I didn't feel worse. I felt finished. I turned the screen off and leaned back. Ethan started the car. The city moved past us in blurred fragments of glass and steel, like something being left behind without resistance. After a while, he spoke quietly. "You're quiet." "I'm done," I said. He nodded once, like he understood exactly what that meant. And maybe he did. Months passed. The case files changed. The countries changed. The networks shifted. Life, in my world, never stopped moving, but something fundamental had settled inside me. Not peace in the sentimental sense. Something more final. Absence of pull. One evening, after a long operational review, I stayed alone in the office longer than usual. Rain traced thin lines down the window. The city below continued its endless, indifferent motion. My assistant had left a folder on my desk. Internal correspondence flagged for review. I opened it without expectation. At the bottom of the document was a single-line note from legal counsel. "Vivian Sinclair has accepted a reduced plea agreement. No further contact requests will be permitted." I read it once, then closed the file. And for the first time, there was nothing behind it. No memory surge. No emotional echo. Just closure, in its most literal form. A door that had finally finished closing. Later that night, Ethan found me still at the window. "You ever think about going back?" he asked casually, not looking at me. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I was uncertain, because the question itself belonged to an older version of time. Eventually, I said no. A pause. Then I added, "There's nothing there anymore that recognizes me." He nodded, as if that was the only answer that made sense. And in a way, it was. Because some lives don't end loudly. They just stop matching who you became.